in and gave it to the siblings and the parents.
Really?
So, but I also heard that yesterday that the vaccine has been for the youngest kids that are eligible has not really been that effective because of the very small dose that they received. So I actually have somebody that's a little 7-year-old that has her second case of it right now, fully vaccinated within the 90 days, unfortunately. So I know.
Amia, who turns 1 in April, just tested positive. My in-laws, my mother-in-law, who let me get the acronym.
The United Nations General Assembly.
My mother-in-law, who watched her on Monday, tested positive on Tuesday. So then we got her tested Tuesday and came back positive. But Rocco, Laura, and I have been testing negative every day. So just keep monitoring it.
Well, good thing you have all those home tests.
The ones that we got from the federal government are 20-minute tests. Were the ones you got 20-minute tests?
The ones that I got mailed to me were 15 minutes. Everybody got a different brand mailed to me, so 20
minutes is a long time.
Yeah,
I like the 10-minute, the one that we gave out. It is a little bit harder it's a little bit more complicated to administer.
Yeah,
but
it is more complicated.
Once you get the hang of it, it's nice.
Right.
I'm a living example of like why it's nice to have all these home tests available. Because being able to test every day, me, Laura, and Rocco testing every day to make sure that we're okay or I'm okay to leave the house,
Is Josh on, Tony?
I don't see him yet.
We'll give him a couple of minutes.
Probably could start, Mark.
We'll give him a minute or so. He should be on. His car is in the driveway, so he's home.
Geez, all you need to do is have Mickey Long be a selectman. All three of you capture the neighborhood.
All the lights are off in his house, so I don't know. I think Skip and Kelly went to bed too, I think. All right, I'll open it up. Have a motion to open the joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Health.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen and I. We're going to start with the COVID update with Deb and John.
Okay. Okay, so we ended the month of February with 17 cases for the month, as compared to last year in February, we had 12. But as compared to our January, we had 157, so 17 was certainly a drop from January to February. So the testing data that came in today was from February 13th to February 26th, that 2-week period. We had 279 people tested and 9 out of them were positive. The vaccine rates, what was on the website, what was posted the last time, February 15th, the February 22nd data, there were no changes at all in the percentiles. I met with the school yesterday, and they're back from school vacation. And they did a pool test yesterday. And I received word today that there were no positive cases at all in the pool testing.
That's good.
So they've been great for their last 3 or 4 weeks with their pool testing. So it looks, everything looks like we are definitely trending in the right direction. And we still have, I did get a new case today. So we have 2 active cases in town right now. But certainly compared to January, this is really a big difference. So fingers crossed now that when we take the masks off in school, which will be on Monday, that we will continue to see the same trend and nobody testing positive in the pool testing. John, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I would say it's been an interesting thing to observe that as the mandates are lifted, I have people asking me if I think it is safe yet. Some folks are continuing to wear a mask. I encourage people to do what they feel is right for them. And people sometimes ask specifics about certain situations. I try to make sure that my answers match the data that we are putting on the town website. But as I said, I think it's interesting that people some are choosing to continue to wear masks in certain situations. I think people have gotten a better understanding of the science that we've been trying to employ and the trends that we see that the data informs us about. So I think it's all good in town.
Excellent.
I'd like to add, we had 2 drive-through distributions of at-home COVID tests that were extremely successful. I think we probably distributed about 600 kits at each event, so over 1,000, probably around 1,200, 1,300 kits in those 2 weeks. Those kits, if you weren't able to go to the drive-through distribution event, they are available here at the town hall and at the library during regular business hours. So any Nahant resident can come to the town hall or the library and get a kit, 1 per person in your household. And there's 2 tests in every kit. They're 10-minute rapid tests. And we're going to be distributing them again, probably in the next couple weeks. We'll do a couple more drive-through distribution events. I want to thank, all the volunteers, the residents who came to that event and helped us ensure that it was a quick experience for those who drove through. We were able to get through stuff pretty quickly. Everybody was in such a great mood and thankful and appreciative of being able to get these kits. So we are happy to do more of that. And I was going to say, we also were able to hand out, we gave a good amount to not only, our departments here in town for our staff and employees, but we were able to give a good amount of kits to, our local restaurants and businesses as well, so that they can keep their staff healthy while working with our residents. So it's been good, and hopefully we'll continue the success there.
You're muted, Josh.
Is Josh there?
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Sorry to be a few minutes late. I was typing away and all of a sudden I looked up at the time and I was already late. But so opening comments. The winter parking ban is in effect until March 20th, 2022. All vehicles must be parked off the street from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. The Charles Kelly Scholarship is now accepting essays until April 15th, 2022. Visit the scholarship page at nahant.org for a full description of essays and instructions. Mail or drop off completed essay and application to Kristen Taylor at Nahant Town Hall, 334 Nahant Road, Nahant, Mass. I'll just mention that I think this is $1,000 scholarship and only a few kids applied last year. So I'd encourage any high school seniors to consider applying for that. Annual town election information. The election is on Saturday, April 30th, 2022. March 9th, 2022 is the last day to obtain nomination papers. March 11th, by 5 p.m., nomination papers must be submitted to the town clerk. March 29th, by 5 p.m. is the last day to reject or withdraw your submittal to the town clerk. April 8th, by 8 p.m. is the last day to register to vote for the election. I know that's the date that some people miss sometimes, so that's April 8th, last day to register. April 22nd, by 5 p.m., you must submit your campaign finance report to the town clerk. And May 31st, 2022, by 5 p.m., the 30-day campaign finance report is due with the town clerk. Visit the election chief page under town clerk's page at nahant.org for more information. I have a couple additional comments I'd like to make. Today, we got a petition for a revision to the plan at the Flash Road playgrounds, specifically in the area of the tennis courts. This petition was requesting a change to the tennis court configuration. The current plan is 2 tennis courts with 2 pickleball courts superimposed on top of those 2 tennis courts. So effectively 2 tennis courts, 2 pickleball courts. This request was for 1 tennis court and 4 pickleball courts in the location that formerly was dedicated for 1 tennis court. That project, of course, has been ongoing for quite a while. And in fact, the only thing that is incomplete is the painting of the courts. That didn't happen last fall because the temperature got too cold. The timing of this request is a little bit unfortunate because the deadline for submittal of citizen petitions for a town meeting is January 31st. Also, that was the deadline for CPC applications. Those would have been good venues for this. Nevertheless, we want to obviously be responsive to our constituents. And so we've taken that, I should say, Tony has taken that plan and provided it to the contractor to see what a change order to the contract would entail, what it would cost. So we'll get that information, and of course we want to complete this project, and we want to make sure it's completed it's a public park, so we want to make sure it's completed in the manner that the public wants. So Tony and I talked this afternoon, should we wait until town meeting and allow the voters to vote? Do you want the 2 tennis courts, or do you want 1 tennis court and the 4 pickleball courts, one or the other, and whatever wins the vote wins? However, that means waiting until town meeting to actually complete the project. be nice to get it done sooner. So what we talked about doing is creating some kind of online survey where we present those same two options, so we can ensure that if people can take it, and we'll see how the survey works out, and whatever configuration gets the most votes is what we'll try to do, assuming that the change order to the contract is minimal. So that's, yeah.
Yeah, could those 4 courts be drawn within the tennis court itself without much of a problem?
This is Scott Bradley at 33 Summer Street. Hi, Mark, Gene, Josh. So, yeah, it would be difficult to draw them on it, although they would physically fit. It's much better for playing tennis without pickleball courts drawn on it, and it's much better to play pickleball without tennis drawn on it. The other thing is that the net locations are different, so you'd really have to have them different, separate courts.
Good thought.
So the engineer, when we first started this project 2 years ago, the folks that are supportive of pickleball submitted a petition asking us to include pickleball lines in the tennis courts. So we brought that to the engineer. They said that they've done it at other courts. It's doable. The net, there is like there's kind of a center strap that you have to put on the tennis net to bring down the height of the net, so it's in, so that it works for pickleball regulations. Obviously it's not ideal, but it provides you a dual use. So that's what the current configuration is 2 tennis courts with 2 pickleball lines in each court, 1 pickleball within each tennis court. So it's 2 and 2.
Tony, excuse me, typically they have to drop the tennis net and put in a pickleball net. They're not really compatible, but that's what I've seen in other courts.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to argue about it because I'm not like a sports engineer. The way that he explained it to me is the difference is the height of the net at the sidelines and at the center of when playing pickleball is lower than a little bit lower on both sides, on both pieces, as compared to tennis. So obviously you have your end posts are much wider on a tennis court. So by shrinking the height of the center, it brings down the height of the net at the sidelines of the pickleball court as well. So it's been manufactured, it's used in other areas. That's the way that it's set up. I'm not advocating for one or the other. We got the request from, I don't know if you were part of that, if the folks on this petition, it wasn't as many signatures. So obviously there's more support today than there was before. But we brought that request to the engineer, and that was the solution they presented to us. So we've now submitted this new request to the engineer to see, what it would take to achieve that. I can say that, we are fully spent on this budget. So any additional cost will be another hurdle that we'll have to overcome.
Just off the cuff, if you had to maintain the 2 tennis courts where they are now, could you take and make the basketball court down on Spring 4 pickleball courts within the basketball court?
You could fit it in the basketball court, I believe in the basketball court on Flash Road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the one on is that Spring? There's one by the town refuse. area?
Yeah, why don't we, this isn't on the agenda for tonight.
Yes,
So
so,
I appreciate, the support for it, but we should put it on the agenda if we're gonna have like a long discussion about what we're gonna do.
That's fair.
yeah, so step one is finding out what the change order would cost. Once we know that, we'll know whether it's something we can consider. If, I hope so, it's a public park. We want it to reflect what the public wants. But when we start talking about other locations and all that, particularly things that just got painted, keep it in mind for next year's CPC applications. That deadline is that, end of January. So all you pickleballers, keep your future aspirations in mind, and please get it in on time next year. And we'll see what we can do with this one. We want to.
As for other locations, Josh, I'm just looking for options.
Yep. Well, they got a nice organized group here, so that'll be their homework, I guess.
Yeah, it's certainly clear that dedicated, a space specifically dedicated for pickleball only is what this group is looking for, correct?
It would be preferable. I mean, it's now the fastest growing sport for people over 50. And we had about 130 pickleballers sign this request in 48 hours. So
Is that the correct terminology, Scott?
What?
Pickleballers?
Pickleballers, absolutely.
Just want to make sure I get it right.
You all have to come out. I'll teach you how to play.
All right, so we got the petition today, and Tony's already sent it along to the contractor. So that's step one, and hopefully it works out. So
Thank
I
you.
think that's about as much as we can dedicate tonight to the conversation. But
Yeah,
the wheels
just
are in
one
motion.
One question, Mr. Chairman, to Tony or town council, does this require a change in the vote from last year for the CBC application?
I don't think it does. I don't think it would. I looked at that language. It was broad enough to talk about the restoration of the courts, but it didn't specify, that, and we had, the current contract includes pickleball lines in the tennis court. So I don't think it would require that. And by the way, we're fully spent on that CPC money. So if we are going to do this, it's going to come with an added cost. So we're going to have to figure out how to fund it, which might mean a new article. We'll have to figure out how much it's going to cost and see what our options there.
Is Dan there?
Oh, yeah, I'm here. Pardon me.
Any thoughts on that, Dan, on whether there needs to be a change?
I haven't looked at the language, but I would be surprised if something that, I would be surprised if it would require a change in the vote, but I haven't looked at it yet. But it's not really small, but it's not really something very large either. I would be surprised if it needed a vote. That's why I was actually considering that when you guys were talking about town meeting vote. I was asking myself, why do we need a town meeting vote for that? But it's a good question to ask.
Well, it might require an appropriation.
Yeah, if the funding is an issue, sure. I was just thinking just the actual overlay of the where you put the paint. I don't think it's part of the vote.
Yep.
But if we need more money, well, yeah, that's a whole different thing. It's appropriation, of course. I'm telling you for that.
All right. So more to come when we hear back from the contractor on the cost, and we'll take it from there. I do think we need to have, if we want to complete the project before town meeting, which would be desirable, I think we need to have some kind of survey, because we obviously don't want to create a situation where we have unhappy tennis players that, it'll be a 4-to-1 ratio, right? For pickleball courts to one tennis court. So
That's a great idea, Josh.
We have to be fair. All right. The other thing I wanted to mention is really to make people aware, in case they aren't, that Nahant is. You'll see an article on the town warrant this year. It's a CPC application for funding to begin planning for Nahant's housing production plan and affordable housing options and elderly housing options. I think this is an important topic for many people in town. We have an aging population here, and there's certainly a desire and a need for elderly housing. And there is a state law for 10% of housing inventory to be deeded as affordable, and Nahant's currently at 3%. So I just wanted to let people know that that process is in the planning phase, and you will see a funding article at this annual town meeting. Selectman Cullinan is leading the effort on this whole overall effort of housing in Nahant. So I just want to make sure people knew about that is in the works and in the plans. So that's all I had for opening comments. Selectman Canty or Selectman Cullinan, anything you want to add?
Thanks for mentioning that, Josh. Tony and I did meet with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council regarding the comprehensive housing plan. I'm excited to get this going. I encourage people to support the appropriation at town meeting. It's certainly something that the town needs. You mentioned that affordable housing, which is an important issue in the heart, not only for the elderly, but for young families. We don't want to be viewed as I personally, I don't want to become a community that is specifically for the elderly. I think we need to support new families coming into this town. And I think it has advantages on both ends of that age scale. So I look forward to getting this done and supporting this article at town meeting.
Hey, Mark, is there a mandate as to when you have to meet that 10% requirement as a town?
No, I mean, I think the requirement only, if you meet the requirement, then, potential developers would come in with under Chapter 40B to do a development that essentially sort of bypasses the town zoning bylaws. They wouldn't be able to do that if we met our standards. So we'll be looking at all of that, and I think it's going to be a helpful tool for the town as we move forward.
Great. Hey, Josh, just one thing. I just happened to catch a segment of Chronicle last night on Channel 5, and there was Nahant was on there as the smallest town in Massachusetts, and Emily Potts gave a nice little quick talk on it, but it was great. It really made us look good.
Yeah, I caught a segment of that on somebody posted something on Facebook, so I saw it there. It's kind of fun to see Nahant on the news.
Yeah, it was awesome.
So if there are no more opening comments, we'll move on to new business. We have a vote on police detail administrative fees. We have a motion there.
I move that the Nahant Board of Selectmen vote to amend the master fee schedule to include a police detail administrative fee, which will not exceed 10% of the cost of services as authorized under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 53C, which shall, except in the case of a city, town, district, or commonwealth, be paid by the persons requesting such private detail. Any such fee received shall be credited as general funds of the city, town, or district, and shall not be used again without further appropriation.
Second.
Discussion. So this is a fee. So if you hire a police detail, this 10% fee goes into the general funds, paid by the person that, or the outfit that hires the police detail. Looks like there's a number of Massachusetts cities and towns that have this fee already. I don't know if, Tony, if you wanted to add anything further or.
Yeah, we're constantly looking at, because our town, our revenue stream is so capped or restricted by Prop 2.5. 99% of our revenue comes from residential property taxes. So we're always looking at revenue streams that don't hit our residents' wallet or pocketbook. This is one of those streams. So it's mostly National Grid that is paying for these details. Town related work, if it requires a detail, we're not going to be charging ourselves for an administrative fee. There are special events here and there that might require a police detail where actually as part of the event fee, you're getting hit with a detail rate fee. So it's already really applied there, and that can be handled on a case by case. So for the most part, this is new revenue coming into the town that, isn't coming from our residents' wallets or pocketbooks, like I said. And, just for an idea of, had we included this fee in FY20, we would have brought in $35,683,000. If we had it in FY21, we would have brought in $40,131. So there's, that's not, major money, but it's certainly not something we want to leave on the table. So it'll help us. It goes into the general fund, and it helps, fund any number of things that get voted on through our omnibus budget.
Sounds good. Any other discussion?
No.
All right, hearing and seeing none, roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen, aye.
Josh Antrim, aye. We have some meeting minutes to approve.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the Board of Selectmen meeting minutes from January 5th, 2022 and January 19th, 2022.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen, aye.
Josh Antrim, aye. And a one-day liquor license. Motion there.
Okay, I just lost it.
I got it, Jim. Go ahead, Jim. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve a one-day all alcohol liquor license to the American Legion Post 215, 96 Nahant Road, Nahant, Mass. On March 11, 2022, from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. for the Evacuation Day and St. Patrick's Day celebration, and authorize the town administrator to sign the special license.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen, aye.
Josh Antrim, aye. Another event, the Vietnam War Veterans Day service.
I move that the Nahant Board of Selectmen vote to approve the event request for the National Vietnam War Veterans Day service on March 29th, 2022 at the Richard Davis Memorial at East Point, starting at 11 a.m.
Second.
Any discussion? I didn't realize that March 29th was Vietnam Veterans Day. So sounds like a good event.
Hey, Josh, it's Bob, Commander of the American Legion. Yeah, it's been recognized for multiple years now, but it was signed into law a few years back that March 29th is Vietnam War Veterans Memorial Day. Last year, we had a nice service up at the Richard Davis Memorial. Thanks to the town, they really did a great job cleaning that memorial up. After the long winter, it can be a little chilly up there, but we'll be having a service recognizing those veterans at 11 a.m. on that day. So hope to see you there.
Thank you for organizing that, Bob. Okay, any other discussion? Roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen and I.
Josh Antrim, aye. Another event request, 40 Steps Dance.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the event request for the 40 Steps annual performance on July 16, 2022, with a rain date of July 17, 2022, at Bailey's Hills, starting at 6 o'clock.
Seconded.
Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen and I.
Josh Antrim, aye. Okay, ongoing business. First item is 9 Little Nahant Road. Before we begin this dialogue, I wanted to offer a brief background and some context for the situation, sort of a high-level overview. So the town has taken two basic actions. The first one is we're seeking to recover the hundreds of thousands of dollars owed to the town in deferred taxes. HUD, who's holding the auction, offered the town, let's say, a very, very small amount, which was not acceptable and would have been irresponsible for us to accept that offer. So we contacted HUD and Congressman Moulton's office in order to work out an arrangement whereby Nahant recoups all or as much as possible of these deferred taxes. It's my assumption that nobody would object to Nahant trying to recoup hundreds of thousands of dollars in deferred taxes. The second action that has taken place is we submitted a CPC application at the deadline, the CPC application deadline of January 31st, to potentially fund a town purchase if that's what the voters of Nahant want. A little more on this application in a few moments, but so it's important to understand that the town can only spend money that has been appropriated by the voters at town meeting. It's the voters that decide what to fund via articles on the town warrant. This is how our government works. It's not up to the TA or the Board of Selectmen to decide funding appropriations. It's the voters that make that decision at town meeting. So what that means is the town cannot participate in the auction unless the auction takes place after town meeting. And of course, only if the voters approve of the funding. So stating it again for clarity, the town of Nahant cannot take any action towards the purchase of this property unless it is authorized in advance by a vote at town meeting. The CPC application was submitted just in case the property doesn't sell before town meeting. In that case, the voters decide if Nahant wants to attempt to purchase it, and if so, for what purpose. It's very likely that the auction will take place and a bid will be accepted prior to town meeting. In this case, the warrant article becomes irrelevant and no vote will occur. In my opinion, it's also likely that the property will be bought by a private party for residential use in compliance with Nahant's zoning bylaws. I think most people would agree this would be an acceptable outcome, provided Nahant recoups the deferred taxes. If the property does not sell at auction, or if the auction occurs after town meeting, the only way the people of Nahant can have a say in what happens to the property is through a vote at town meeting. The CPC application potentially gives the people of Nahant the opportunity to decide what happens with this property. This is called being prepared, and I think it is the responsible thing to do. The Board of Selectmen and the TA are not trying to define or tell people what the use of this property should be. We are only potentially allowing the voters of Nahant the chance to have a choice in how this property is used. So that is, to me, the context in which this discussion to take place. Looking forward to hearing public comments. I do request that if you make a comment, you say what you do want in addition to maybe what you don't want. But with that, I don't know, Selectman Canty or Selectman Cullen, if you have anything you want to add.
I think you summed it up very well, Mr. Chairman, and I don't think I can add to what you said.
I'd just like to ask a couple of simple questions. This morning, I had a great conversation with Tony on this. And the more we talked, the more complex and complicated it seemed to get in terms of what avenues you could take to make this work. But one question I have was, under what condition can we recoup the thousands of dollars owed, the hundreds of thousands owed to us in tax debt? Do we need to have a single purchaser buy the property in order to do that?
Well, it's through negotiations with HUD. I'm gonna explain this as I understand it, and hopefully I get it right. And Dan, if I get it wrong, you'll let me know. But so what HUD said to us is they're owed a little under $1.1 million. And what they said is, you, Town of Nahant, won't get anything unless the bid exceeds the $1.1 million. And then you can start to get recoup your deferred taxes. And what we just said to them is, no, that is not an acceptable thing. This needs to be shared fairly. That we get a fair share and you get a fair share as the bid amount goes up, not just any amount over $1.1 million. So that's sort of the short version of the negotiations with HUD. That's how we hope to recoup those hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And then certainly in a hypothetical scenario that a bid is made that is higher than both what HUD is owed and what the town is owed, then obviously we both get what we are looking to be recouped and go our different ways.
Yeah, that would have
it only comes like what Josh was saying there comes into play if the sale amount is less than what we both are owed together.
Yeah, which is roughly speaking $1.6 million. So I think if it's 1.6 million or more, everyone's happy. If it's below we just want to make sure we're as happy as we possibly can, regardless of what the accepted bid is.
So did you want to open this up as like a public forum?
Yeah, I don't know, Tony, if you had any words you wanted to add to my my introduction.
I just think that, this is this issue is changing rapidly. Since in 1 month, things like new information has come across our desk that has kind of changed how we're approaching the situation, and so as those things evolve, we're trying to keep the public as informed as possible. I think you summed it up pretty well there, where, for folks who are concerned about the town, getting involved in this process, I hope your summary, puts their mind at ease a little bit that, we can't get involved without approval and appropriation at town meetings. So what the town is trying to do here is, put the residents in a position to have a vote on whether the town gets involved and how we get and for what purpose. But as you mentioned, if the auction occurs before town meeting and a bid is accepted, this all goes away. Unfortunately, we wouldn't have any opportunity to get involved.
Have we heard back from HUD on an auction date yet?
We have not.
Mr. Chairman, I understand that there's been some discussion about the town interfering with HUD or something that, but I just want to make it clear that the town did not request a delay on the auction. That is entirely up to HUD. When the town administrator had brought this to my attention, my initial thought was if we could leverage the taxes that were owed to the town in the purchase of the property, and perhaps, in my mind alone, making some needed open space in Little Nahant, that might be a good idea. But as you said, ultimately that will be a decision by the town.
If I just a clarification point on one of the things you just said there, Mark, you know, when we originally applied for this CPC application, we were asking HUD to pump the brakes. They just came to us and said, this is going up for auction and we're going to be setting this date in the sometimes very near future, and we have to put this out to bid. And so we were asking HUD, hold on a second, like let us get our heads around this situation and see, you know, how we could potentially like do what's best for the town. So we did reach out originally to HUD and ask Congressman Moulton's office to ask HUD to slow down the scheduling of the auction and to have a discussion with us about a potential, you know, direct sale with the town before going to auction. We submitted the application. That's how it was submitted at that time. We learned very soon after that, as I mentioned, things are changing quickly. We learned very quickly after that that they could not engage with the town regarding a direct sale because HUD doesn't actually own the property yet. They just are in control of the reverse mortgage. So they have to go to auction. The property has to go to auction first. We get cut out of that process because we don't have a town meeting vote giving us an appropriation or authority to participate. So if the auction occurs before town meeting, we can't be involved in that. We did reach out originally, but we learned quickly that, and I will say, you know, HUD made it seem that the auction was urgent for them, that it needed to occur, like postponing the auction so that the town could go to town meeting and be prepared was out of the cards. You know, that's how they made it sound. And then this auction got scheduled for February 15th, and then they just suddenly postponed it, and they haven't, since the 15th, they have not given us an answer as to why or when it will be rescheduled. So we're kind of in the dark here as well. I'm not very pleased with that. You know, I expect more from that agency to give us some answers, but just wanted to make that clarification.
Tony, the question that everybody's had on this is why was it canceled? And I think you're going to answer it in the best way you can. But I think if we can make a more concerted effort to find that out, it would make a lot of people feel a lot more comfortable.
Well, so 2 quick points. The first one is, Tony, when you said that the air quotes pump the brake phone call was made, I think it's okay for me to mention the number. At that time, HUD's offer to Nahant was $10,000. So why would we ever even think about going along with that? It would be irresponsible in light of the hundreds of thousands of dollars in deferred taxes that are owed to the taxpayers of Nahant. I mean, that would be ridiculous. And just a few moments ago, I got a text from Dan Scripp, who had reached out to HUD's attorney. Dan, do you think it's okay for me to convey what?
Yeah,
you said?
Sure, no problem, no problem at all.
The HUD's attorney responded to Dan, just got your voicemail for settlement authority purposes. HUD needed to run a full appraisal and had to schedule that with the tenants in order to get that done. Last I heard from HUD, things are on course as far as that goes, end quote. So that's HUD's response as of, I don't know what, an hour ago.
That's an answer.
That's not a very good answer.
No.
I
Mr.
mean,
Chair,
I don't know what they mean for settlement purposes when we're not even close.
But anyway, that's the latest information we have.
All right.
Obviously, we'll need to continue to work on getting Nahant's fair share of this auction bid.
Mr. Chairman, you might want to just mention that, we're talking about abating taxes here. And I just want to mention that this is not a discretionary issue by the town, by the Board of Selectmen, or the town administrator. This is governed by Mass General Law. If individuals meet certain criteria in terms of age and income, and they apply for an abatement or deferral of taxes, it's done automatically. So it's not something that we have discretion over. They did that. They followed the guidelines by Mass General Law. I believe, Dan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you can defer up to 50% of the assessed value of your property.
That's right.
And I think they reached that amount in what, Tony, 2018 or 19? The estate?
They actually never really reached the amount because assessed values just kept increasing. So they rode like they were probably around like between 45 and 50%. And you become eligible for this state law authorized deferment of taxes at 65. Is that right, Dan?
That's right, 65, and you have to be a resident of town for, I think, 10 years, and your income has to be up to a certain level.
I think
And they
it's
met all those things.
I think it was like 40,000 or something.
Right around there, yeah.
And, so good for them. They lived a very long life. Bad for us. They were deferring from 65 years old. I think they lived until their, 90s. So for quite a few years, they met those eligibility requirements and the town couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Mark, Dan, and Tony, because, I think there has been some concern from the citizens saying, how could we let this happen? How can we let this much deferred tax accumulate? And the answer is that's the state law. It's not something we have a choice over.
Mr. Chair, can I add two things? I think cut off some questions we might be getting soon.
Yes, please.
The first obvious question I think residents might have is why aren't taxes first in line? And that's a great question. This is one particular oddity in the law that gives reverse mortgages priority over senior deferred taxes, property taxes deferred pursuant to that senior exemption. So it's specifically in the law. It was added to that particular statute, Chapter 5, Chapter 59, Section 5, Clause 41A in 1989. And it basically was aimed at giving seniorities an extra level of comfort in terms of not having to leave their home. So that's why taxes are actually secondary, in this case, to property, to the reverse mortgage. It's very unusual. And Sheila had looked into it around the other areas of town and confirmed that there's no other situation like even near to this point that we are facing in Nahant. The second thing I wanted to add was we have reached out to the 4 subsidizing agencies in the Commonwealth, and we confirmed that there are no pending 40B applications regarding anywhere in the Nahant, let alone 9 Little Nahant Road. So there's no one even sniffing around for a 40B to the extent anyone is worried about that sort of thing tonight.
That's good. Thanks for reaching out to those organizations, Dan.
Question if I could. If an auction takes place and HUD doesn't accept any of the bids,
You're breaking up a little bit, Gene.
okay, is
It's
that
on my
better?
end.
Is that any better?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yep.
If, in fact, Tony, you could probably answer this. If a bid is not accepted during the auction process, can we negotiate with HUD to purchase that property?
HUD, if the auction fails, HUD then becomes the owner of the property and then has the ability to negotiate with the town for a direct sale.
Is there any likelihood that could happen?
That's
Excuse
hard
me,
to.
I don't know if you can all hear me, but I've lost my audio, so I'm gonna move closer to my router in the hopes it comes back, but please continue.
We can hear you, although you can't hear me saying that. So yes, the answer to that, Gene, is if the auction fails, then HUD could enter into a direct sale with the town, and they have expressed interest in doing that because for the purposes that we would use the property align with their purposes. We obviously, what they have said and what we've said before is we couldn't buy the property and then sell it for profit for, non-affordable housing effort. We couldn't buy it, subdivide it, and then sell it for 2 lots. HUD wouldn't allow that. They would come after us for those funds. So for the other purposes, it does fall in line with them. So they've expressed interest in doing that if the auction fails. Again, without approval at town meeting, though, and an appropriation, we can't take advantage of that opportunity. And it's hard to tell. It's really hard to know what would happen at auction.
Dan, may I ask a question?
Yep. Can you announce your name and address?
Sure, that's me. It's Enzo, 28 Sunset Road, Nahant. Dan, I guess the question I have is for you. Back in 1995, because I did some research on it, they did their tax deferral, the Pizarroses. And with that, do they have to renew that every single year?
Yes, they do.
Okay. So there's only one of those. So can we see those? I'd like to be able to see all the renewals every year. If they in fact,
I haven't seen them. That would be in Sheila's office.
okay, so she should have to come up with those. Number 2, so back in 1995, they did their tax deferral. And a lot of people thought they were delinquent. And, if you look at the Salem Registry of Deeds, it was filed, it was done right.
Yeah.
But in 2009, that's when they did their reverse mortgage.
Right.
So they did a reverse mortgage in 2009. That's 14 years later. Let me ask you this. The bank that was involved would always ask, because I've sold property, I've bought property, they're going to ask for a municipal lien certificate. Why wasn't that a red flag for them?
Well,
if it was a red flag, why did they give them the loan, and why should the Nahant be on the hook for those for the loss of back taxes? It sounds like the bank and HUD made the mistakes.
Well, okay, so HUD just inherited the mortgage after MetLife had it, after Nation Star had it, after forget the other name had it as well. So they just inherited back in the 2010 somewhere.
Right.
The mortgage papers, the original mortgage papers indicate that the mortgagee, mortgagors, which is the case of property owners, could
Right.
not enter any sort of abatement agreements that would take priority over the mortgage, right?
I see that. It's written
Yeah.
it's written in the paperwork.
And pursuant to that statute I mentioned earlier, the reverse mortgage is not subservient to the deferrals, tax deferrals. That's one point I think might hopefully address your question. In terms of them asking for an MLC, that would have not have, there were no overdue taxes. These taxes were abated, which means their due date was put off to sometime in the future. So they weren't overdue, they were abated, not the same thing. Because
But still, when they did a title search at the Registry of Deeds, it's clearly a red flag saying these people have abated their taxes for a certain, for this length of time. Why would we give them that kind of money?
Well, we don't.
It seems like the bank should be on the hook for this.
Well, we brought this up to HUD. We said, first of all, we were first and right by a number of, even if after you get your reverse mortgage, we were there years before. We've been helping these folks a decade before you came along. So at most, you only take priority as you mentioned, 2006, 7. And they disputed that. So we're fighting with that. And like Tony mentioned, we asked them to pump the brakes because there are these issues we need to hash out. And this very well could lead to litigation where a court could come up and say, yeah, Nahant, you're right. But we're behind the 8 ball for sure. And I know you want to talk about the renewals, but we had no choice but to renew, as I think Selectman Coleman mentioned. In fact, the Appellate Tax Board recently came out with a decision, about a year ago, regarding the city of Quincy, who did what I think you're suggesting, which is to say, hey, we happen to notice that after we entered this abatement agreement with you, elderly citizen, you went ahead and got a reverse mortgage. So you know what? You're not getting your abatement anymore. ATB said, nope, can't do it. They still check all the boxes in the statute. You cannot deny them, give them their abatement. And that was not appealed to the Superior Court. So we're sort of looking at that as the only guidance with regard to not renewing the agreement.
In response to that, and I don't have a copy of it in front of me, but I had read at one point, and Enzo, you've probably gone into this already, but the notice of default and foreclosure, which was sometime in January, spells everything out as to exactly how this should go.
Well, yes, I understand that, but they've been dead for 3 years. How this never came up 3 years ago is another red flag for me. I mean, I don't understand how any of this could have happened, and the town's going to get take the licking for it. I think HUD and I think the banks have a responsibility, and I understand they're a government agency and they're telling you no, but you know something, I'd go right at it, right after them and say, no, sorry, this isn't the way it's going to be. We want our share because we abated it. You should have seen that, you should have seen that the bank should have seen that they took $900,000 and they owed 100 and some odd thousand. And then with interest, it's another 100 and some odd thousand. It brings it up to what, $311,000, I think.
Exactly.
Right. So I think that I would fight that. I mean, I think that's that's just my opinion on the way to go. And I understand you guys are probably, beating your heads against the wall trying to figure out how to do this, but there's got to be a way. And I can understand, they possibly deferred the auction because you said pump the brakes. That's a possibility too, wouldn't you say?
That happened later. So we asked them when we asked them to pump the brakes, they said, no, this auction has to occur and we're going to schedule it in the coming weeks. And then they scheduled it for the 15th. And then, to be honest, it was shortly before they postponed it was when we responded to their 10,000 offer and said, no, that's unacceptable. We would fight that. We would fight that issue. And then they
Right.
postponed it. So I don't know if, we don't, they never gave us a true answer as to why they postponed it. And then Enzo, just one other comment that you had mentioned there. So when they passed away 3 years ago, obviously
Yeah.
they're no longer eligible for the deferral.
Right.
So HUD paid taxes at that time.
So they pay the taxes for
The
3
last
years.
3 years, the last 3 years or 2 years or so, I think we're actually in the third year now, but the last 2 years have been paid, but it's from prior to they passing away back to when they first started filing for the deferred. That's what totals up the amount of taxes that have been abated.
Okay, so can we get copies of the renewals every year? Is that possible?
Yeah, Sheila should be able to produce that.
Okay. All right, that's all. That's all.
So anyway, so Enzo, to your point, fighting for that money is exactly what we're doing. So we're on the same page.
Well, I would, yeah, I would think you would, yeah. Okay, thank you. Thanks for your time.
One thing I forgot to mention a few minutes ago was that on this CPC application, there was a lot of concern, I think, from the neighborhood that when we submitted the CPC application, we checked all 4 boxes. And due to concern in the neighborhood, we submitted a revised CPC application on Monday that removed housing as one of the options. So in an attempt to allay that fear. So that housing option has been removed from the CPC application. I see Carol and Gary have their hand raised.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, Gary, we can.
Okay. My question is, doesn't the tax lien go with the property? Not so much, so the property still has a lien on it regardless of who buys it. And if they want to develop it or, before they can pull permits, they have to clear that lien up.
And you can probably explain that best.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Gary,
And
could
it-
you, before we answer that, Gary, could you say your name and address, please?
Oh, I'm Gary Prohorchik at 10 Chamberlain Circle in Little Nahant.
Thank you. Sorry to be a stickler on it. I'm just trying to get us in the
No worries.
mode of it.
Yeah, the open meeting
Sorry,
laws
go ahead,
require
Dan.
that. So no, what you're Garrett, you're talking about is running with the land, and unfortunately, this doesn't. Individual property owners are actually taxed, right? So if property taxes are assessed, they're assessed against the property owner, but 99 times out of 100, that lien takes priority over anyone else. But this is that one time out of 100 where it doesn't. The only recourse we would have if we can't get payment out of HUD or from a sale of the property is to pursue the estate. You can imagine there's going to be next to nothing in the estate, given that they couldn't even really pay the taxes over the years. So it does not run with the property, unfortunately. And I know that's quite a hard pill to swallow, but that's one thing we brought up to HUD. We said, hey, listen, we're going to challenge this too, even though it's not going to be, it's going to be tough to win that one.
Well, that's unfortunate.
Well, yeah, the whole situation is unfortunate. We don't think this is, and this is why Tony reached out to Representative Moulton. We said this was not a reasonably foreseeable result of the 1989 amendment. This is not what it was meant to do. Double dipping, I don't think was the double dipping to the extent it hurts taxpayers was not the purpose or foreseeable outcome of this 1989 amendment. And there might need to be a change somewhere in the law. So maybe this will lead to it. Who knows?
Also, aren't most tax deferments just a portion of the taxes, not 100%?
And not this one. This one is a full property tax up to, as I think Josh mentioned, I think half of the assessed value of the property.
All right.
All right. So the statute is I want to say chapter 59, section 5, clause 41A. So if you want to take it, it's a very, very long statute, but the relevant part is just clause 41A.
All right. Well, thank
Okay.
you.
You bet.
Anyone else have any comments or questions? You can unmute yourself and make those comments or questions.
Hi, this is Deirdre Pocase at Linda Lane. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can
Yeah.
hear you.
Making sure. So I was just curious, Tony, you had said that we had originally had 4 items checked. Actually, Josh, I think you said we had the 4 items checked off on the list of what potential uses would be, and then you changed it to not include housing. But then I believe you said in the event of a failed auction, that if the town was able to negotiate a direct purchase, there were reasons that HUD would be amenable to us using it in different ways. What were the ways, Tony, that they were going to be accepting that still were in agreement with those that were on the list?
Affordable housing, open space and recreation, or historic preservation.
Okay, so assuming that the one for the housing was already removed from the CPC application, then would that go back onto consideration, or would that still be left off?
It would still be, the reason we took it off is because of the response we received from the neighborhood. But it wouldn't hurt our chances of, pursuing a purchase from HUD. HUD is okay with any one of those options. So not including it isn't going to deter them from negotiating with us. Obviously, HUD is housing and urban development. So, they are pro housing. But I think they would want to, I would hope that they would seek to work with the community if they were in a position to be able to do so. Currently, they are not, because they don't actually own the property yet, and it has to go to an auction first. If the auction fails, they become the owner of the property. I would hope, and they've seemed to they've seemed to express to us that they would come to us first. Even though, I don't think, even with taking housing off of the potential future use, if the town were to buy it, I don't think would deter them from having that conversation with us.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be sure that they were not going to have that be the only option that they would be interested in, since you've removed it from the CPC application.
Correct.
Anyone else want to unmute themselves and ask any questions or comment?
This is Gary again.
Hey, Gary.
Dan, what you said that was in section 59. What was the sub?
41A. If you just search, if you just hit search and look for, enter the word reverse mortgages or something like that, it'll bring you right to it. There's only, I think, one reference to it.
Okay.
If you can't find it, let me know. I'll send you the actual statute.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
You bet.
Anyone else? Feel free to unmute yourself. All right, if no one else from the public wants to chime in, I'll just say we'll continue to keep you updated, and when we hear any news from HUD about when the auction might be, and hopefully some progress we make on our end in assuring recouping those deferred taxes, we'll keep you informed about that as well.
Hey, Dan,
Yes.
that's a stretch of a question, but only because it's been asked and I don't have the answer.
Go for it.
Is this subject to eminent domain?
Well, you mean,
Because
can we take, well, yeah. You mean, can we take 9 Lot Road pursuant to eminent domain?
Yeah.
I I'm not an ED attorney, I'll be quite frank with you, but I don't see why not. We can take pretty much anything by eminent domain if you have a good enough reason. That's what it's there for.
If approved by town meeting.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that'd be town meeting issue. Pretty much any acquisition of property,
Yeah.
except like tax title, needs to go through town meeting.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
And then, even if let's say we went down that, let's go down that hypothetical real quick, Gene. Even if we went down that road, you're then in court trying to figure out the value of what you're paying for the property. If we can have that discussion just directly, with HUD, should the auction fail, or it's probably a cheaper avenue for the town.
Makes more sense. Yeah.
If HUD gets so the other thing if I can just add one more thing, you just kind of brought it up, is the CPC application is for 1.1 million. That's a borrowing article, and it's up to 1.1 million. And the reason we put that number in there is because we know HUD is owed just under that amount. But I can tell you that if the auction happened tomorrow and the highest bid was 100 grand and HUD didn't accept it, that would be our starting point in a negotiation. We would try to take advantage of the opportunity, because if we buy it, we're not going to recoup our taxes. So our way of recouping the taxes is by getting a cheaper price on the property and creating an asset for the townspeople. So I just want to be clear that just because it says 1.1 on the CPC application doesn't mean we would necessarily use all 1.1.
Yeah, but no matter what we do, we're not going to get the taxes more than likely. But that 1.1 is probably going to be just enough to sustain purchasing or bidding on that property, and then restoring it, unless that's a separate article, then restoration and or landscaping or all of the ancillary type things that we need to do to make that property ready for the public.
Yeah.
What that final amount would be is unknown, but would not exceed 1.1 if approved at town meeting.
Good.
I see Karen Ragnanti has her hand raised. Karen, did you want to chime in? There
Yes.
you are.
Thank you, Josh. I have two quick questions. I just wanted to follow along Jean's thinking. And so we haven't discussed yet. Let's say there isn't a bidder for the auction, or HUD doesn't accept it, and the town does decide to negotiate with HUD. And let's say it's, $1 million, right? We end up paying $1 million to get the property. And let's say that all that has happened, and the CPC applications, they're already in now. So, and town meetings in April, right? May. And so I'm sorry, I'm having trouble asking my question, but it's
Okay.
What then happens process-wise to allocate whatever funds may be needed for maintenance or for tearing down the building? Let's say if that was going to be open space, or whatever is going to happen to the building, when does that come up in the process? Let's say it's, the CPC applications went in now, and let's say the majority of that money, or all of it, is used for the purchase. That's my first question.
Yeah, I think, we'd have to make some kind of estimate of what those costs would be. For example, building demolition. In order for people to have make an informed vote. Of course, you could always make your vote and hope for the best, but I think, we'd try to get some kind of estimate on that, or FinCom would, or you know.
Well, if I work through that backwards, that process, auction fails and now HUD owns the property and they are willing to talk to the town. At that point, I would get some professional opinions on costs for, all those potential options.
Yes.
And I would hold off like a negotiation with HUD until going to town meeting, I guess. I think that's how I would recommend doing it, because then you can go to town meeting and say, we know it's going to cost X amount to tear down the building. We're asking for 1.1. That, so this is how much money I have to work with to negotiate a sale with HUD.
It's a great approach.
Yeah, I'm just curious about the process of how, like, let's say the tear down was, 80,000 to 100,000. And let's say, given that I'm in a butter, I can just let you guys know that grass can grow really, really tall. And it's, it's an issue because it's really an issue, and it's a fire hazard. And so it's like, well, like, let's say the town had to come up with another couple $100,000 for maintenance and for tearing the building down or whatever. It's just, I was just trying to understand where in the process that happened,
So I would want to go, I think I would want to go to town meeting with that information, Karen, and say to the voters, if we knock this down for open space, it's going to cost the town X amount of dollars. So knowing that, how much are you willing to invest in this opportunity?
Right. Yeah, great. Or historical renovation, because if you go that route, that's really going to be a price tag.
Sure. So same thing, right? I would get that information too. So the people of town would say, I'm okay with you spending $1 million, but I'm not okay with you spending $2 million.
Yeah. Okay.
So in which case I would then, if it was approved for $1 million, I would go to HUD and say, I have $1 million, but X amount of it is reserved for the job after I buy. So I can't spend more than the difference on this property.
Okay.
And if HUD said, well, we're not gonna sell it to you for that amount, then we'd have to decide, whether we're come back to the town at a future date for more money or walk away from the deal.
Mhm.
But I would want to know, I would take guidance from the people of town as to how much money we would invest in this option.
Okay, thank you, Tony. That's very helpful. And related to that is, it's March now. And so I can just give you guys a heads up, starting definitely in May, the grass is going to need to be cut. And I'm just curious, where does that fall and who's going to do that? And because it does grow really, really tall, and it's there's bugs and there's, Lyme disease, and, it's like, so that's another consideration, those of us that live close have.
I know it stinks, it's been an eyesore for a long time, but it's not town's property, so we wouldn't be able to maintain the lawn and so on.
But is there someone, Josh, that would, just so that we know? I mean, does that fall in HUD's responsibility?
I can answer that, Josh.
Thank you, Dan.
Mr. Chairman. The administrator of the estate, the estate is still the owner of the property. The administrator is the son, Nicholas Pizarris.
Yeah, we
His
know
name is
him.
Nicholas. He's the guy that is making the decisions regarding that property. So if you want someone to talk to regarding maintaining the property, he's the guy to go to. He's your neighbor, essentially.
Yeah,
Karen,
he's in Rhode Island.
Kevin, let me just chime in a little here. I think what you're talking about here is public safety.
Yeah.
And it could be a fire hazard. It could be the issue here. You know, the health agent for the town, John Coolan, would have. John, you could probably speak to this better than I could, but you'd have to demonstrate that the property is being maintained in a way that is presenting a public health hazard. Sometimes that's very hard to do. Just because someone doesn't want to cut the grass doesn't mean it's a public health issue. But John, I'll let you chime in. I think this is really a public health issue that she's talking about.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, I have been contacted over the years by a number of people, including neighbors, regarding the condition of the property. I have gone to the property. I've gone to the door. I've circled the property as much as I could on the public way or any complaining neighbors. And it has been very difficult to witness harborage conditions that would support vermin. Now, I understand that if someone sees insects or any animals that are undesirable coming from a particular property, that's where you look. However, the conditions that harbor these undesirable animals or insects have to be present when someone like myself goes by. Now, I've contacted the owners over the years, but that's been some number of years ago. And the property has been in its current condition for quite a few years. And I really have not been able to identify trash conditions or observe conditions on the property that I could cite. Now, I'm not allowed to enter anybody's property except to go to a front door and try to make contact. So efforts have been made, and it has been frustrating over the years. And here we are. We have a property that has issues that we're going to need to address in a way that tries to mitigate whatever is there or might be there. If somebody has a specific issue, I will go there again. However, we are limited by local and state regulations, and even though the height of grass has implications, we do not regulate the height of grass. So I would have to be able to observe conditions that are directly related to and able to be cited. I see the property as I go by and when I'm in town, and I really wish I could do more.
Tony, a follow-up question on that. I'm sure that the fire chief has taken a look at this property, and there are provisions in Mass General Law that allow the town or the fire chief to designate a structure sort of unfit and do not enter. Has the fire chief done that?
So the fire chief joined us when we took a look at the property a few weeks ago. I don't remember. I don't exactly recall the exact date, but it was a couple weeks ago. He joined us, and he did look into. He was looking into what actions might need to be taken, and I believe a lot of that information was shared with. Is it Nick, Dan?
The son, Nicholas. Yeah. Well, Chief Furlong spoke to Nicholas. I don't know if Joe. I don't know if Austin did. I can tell you that Austin did reach out to me today regarding the progress the two residents were taking to get out of there. So he is definitely concerned. He has not ignored the situation.
And they have been lined up for housing in Lynn, I believe, but
Yes, there are two folks there. One's an elderly disabled woman who apparently is on the verge of getting housing from Lynn, but's having some sort of issue. So we're trying to help mitigate that, to be honest, to get them out. And he, the second fellow there, he's ready to leave. He's just there because she's there, because he takes care of her, because she needs help. So once she's gone, he's gone, according to him. Anyway, his name is Dave. According to Dave.
so yeah, we're looking into it. We're certainly on top of that issue.
Yeah, in other words, efforts are underway to try and help the two residents find safer living conditions. Enzo, you have your hand up?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, one last question. You mentioned that you wouldn't, you say you're not going to go over 1.1 million. But that being said, what happens if you spend the 1.1 million to buy it because you have to, and then you have to come back to the town to ask for more to either restore it or to tear it down and make it open space? How much more do you anticipate asking for, especially for restoration? Restoration would be a huge undertaking.
Mr. Chairman, let me jump in on this if I could. First of all, the 1.1 million is an authorization to borrow, so it's something that we have discretion over, the Board of Selectmen, that is, as you know, Enzo. And I, as a member of the board, would not expend any of that in terms of purchasing unless I knew what the total plan was going to be. And as the town administrator has said, he would get estimates on if we're going to take it down and make it open space, what's that going to cost? If there was a restoration, what is that going to cost? And I think it has to be looked at as a package, and it has to be voted on as a package by the town.
Okay, so you're saying you're gonna that what you're saying is you're gonna figure out with that 1.1 million what it's gonna cost you. I mean, I think you need to find that out now, what it's gonna cost to take it down or restore it before you go to HUD and make the offer.
We're doing that.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
looking into costs,
are
figuring
you
out.
gonna share that with the public?
Once we have that, sure.
Yeah, it's easy. It's it's fairly cheap. It's fairly easy for me to get cost estimates on demolition. To get cost estimates on restoration, I'd have to hire a professional on that, and I'm gonna try not to do that. And I'm hoping that HUD schedules the auction for soon, because if the auction is a success, this comes off the table and there's no need to invest in having someone go and look into what it would cost to do a historic preservation project. So I'm trying to wait to see what HUD does. Obviously, at some point, the warrant articles need to be finalized. So I'm hoping that they schedule it for soon. And then if it fails, then we could go and actually get a cost of that. Now, further, the other part of checking the box on historic preservation in the application for CPC and including it in the article at town meeting, doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a full-on restoration of the building. It could mean that we see that restoring the building would be too expensive and we don't really have a future use for it. So we end up making it a park anyways, but maybe we put a monument or some type of like signage or something to recognize the historic element that was there. And you could use then that portion of CPC funds for that effort. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a full-on restoration. But if you eliminate historic preservation from the application and from the article, then we can't use that pot of CPC funds for any of the effort. Even a
Okay.
small.
I do realize that. I guess, I mean, I would like to see it, honestly, my own opinion, collecting taxes. You know, I'd like to see it back on the tax rolls, to be quite honest with you, but you know, it's up to the people and it's up to, you know, how much they want to spend. But I just don't want to see it exceed, you know, a massive amount of money to restore it or, you know, tear it down or whatever.
Tony.
Thank you.
Thank you, and Tony, in line with what you were talking about, getting cost estimates, it would probably be a great idea to get those together now, maybe even a real estate appraisal in its current condition, considering the value of the land, and have that all ready so that if we do go to either open space or historic restoration, just putting some numbers together here quickly. If you were to bid in the $700,000 range, just a guess, and your tear down's going to cost you probably $50,000 to $75,000, and your area development after all that's going to be, yeah, you're probably right. Your area development's going to be somewhere in the vicinity of 150, 200, which is going to bring you right up to that 1.1. Whereas if you do the restoration, you back out the demolition costs, you add in the restoration costs, and that's going to be well over $1 million.
Yeah, I completely, the intention is to have all that information prepared and provided to the public so that a well-informed decision can be made at town meeting. 100%. It's just hard for me to justify spending town resources on a professional to go in there and give me a historic restoration cost estimate when the next week it could be sold at auction and this completely goes out the door and I just spent town funds for nothing. So I just want to, it sounds like we got some communication from HUD today. Hopefully, like, we can pressure them to give us some type of timeline on when this auction is going to occur. And I hope it's sooner than later. And I hope, you know, it sounds like, you know, if someone bids a huge amount of money and we all get paid and it stays on the tax rolls, you know, then there's no sense in going down that road. But I know that at some point we have to get this information if the auction doesn't get scheduled, because the warrant's got to get finalized. People need this information. So I don't think it's not quite necessary today. It might become necessary, you know, in the next couple of weeks to take that risk. But right now, I want to find out when this auction is going to occur.
You're right, Tony. I think you're right, Tony, that, you know, it seems likely that we'll get some news on when the auction is going to take place, because, you know, we don't want to spend money finding out how much this restoration might cost if the auction is going to take place and be successful 3 weeks from now, because we'll just be flushing.
But that could also turn out to be a great return on your investment to do that.
Well, I mean, I guess to Tony's point, that's why it's so important for us to know when the auction will take place.
Okay.
I see Suzanne Macarelli's hand up.
Hi, it's Suzanne Macarelli, 15 Little Nahant Road. Just regarding David and Cheryl, the two people that occupy the building, who, by the way, have been great neighbors. Not sure how they can live in there, but they've been really considerate neighbors. I I just want to remind everyone who doesn't live in the neighborhood, when Mariana and Constantine Pizarris, about 5 or 6 years ago, that's the mom and dad that have passed away, when they vacated the property for a while and moved into their house up in Canada, that's when the trouble began. That's when the prostitutes and the drug dealers moved in. And I guess my worry is to leave that vacant. We already experienced that in the neighborhood. The police would surveil, from my mom's driveway here. It was a pretty bad situation, and it wasn't remedied until the lead prostitute overdosed in the house, and then that solved the problem. So I wouldn't leave it vacant for too long.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like it will be. I mean, it seems likely that the HUD auction will take place pretty soon, but if it is after town meeting and the voters want to have a role in what happens to the property, then I think we would make sure the place is secured and nothing like that would be possible.
Okay, thanks. And maybe it's the future home of pickleball courts. Sounds like there's a lot of heart for that. We would be the envy of the North Shore.
Call two birds with one stone, I guess.
I'd be all for it. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Karen, is your hand up again or still from before? You're
Yes,
muted right now.
it's
there you
up
go.
again.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, so just to echo what Suzanne just said about Dave and Cheryl, Dave is the one that cuts the grass at the moment. I have to beg and plead, but he does. So having them there as long as possible, even though I know, Dan, you want to get them out. I just wanted to say it from a neighborhood's perspective, having somebody there and the lights on and after my begging and pleading, he cuts the grass, does help mitigate this issue. And I would just also like to, and I don't know if it's possible, just formally request that if they do leave and the town does buy it, if there's some way that we can either through the fire department's overseeing it or whatever, there was a fire there years ago, and the fire guys were here and they were like, I spent quite a bit of time talking to them. They were incredibly concerned. And, and if there's a way to help maintain the property through the fire department temporarily while all this through the summer, I just wanted to formally just request that. So, and I don't know if it's possible, but I just wanted to say, just to get us through, this transition, given summer's coming up. And so those were my 2 points.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, guys. Thank you for all the attention you're paying to this. So thank you.
You're welcome. All right, any other comments? I don't see anybody's hand up so I guess last chance to unmute yourself and comment. I don't see anybody else, so the next item on the agenda is review and approve ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act funding. We have a motion on that.
I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the American Rescue Plan Act expenditures provided by the town administrator.
Second.
Discussion. Tony, do you want to walk through that expenditure?
Yeah. So the American Rescue Plan Act is the second form of COVID relief funds provided to municipalities. The first was called the CARES Act. This was every community. It was based on your population. So, we received $1 million in ARPA funds. We have the ability to spend those funds almost like free cash with the authority of the Board of Selectmen. Many of the funds are limited to certain types of spending. However, they do allow for a municipality to designate up to $10 million of ARPA funds as revenue loss and then be allowed to use it for general government purposes. The reason it's 10 million is, just for perspective, you have some cities and towns that receive 30, 50, 60, 70 million dollars. Obviously, we only received one. So we're able to claim the entire amount and use it under the more flexible guideline of general government services. I could say that we've spent, especially out of the gate, a lot of these funds were spent on public health related items. So payroll associated with our public health nurses, our public health agent, anyone working at the COVID testing clinics or the COVID vaccine clinics, ancillary costs like cell phone for our health nurse who's doing all the tracing, computers for our health nurses for the reporting requirements, a number of different costs like that. Certainly costs associated with our website, any type of communication that we're doing to help with the response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So payroll expenses added up to $45,292. I'm sorry, $45,962. Operating expenses, $25,411. Capital expenses are at $248,653. 150,000 of that was for COVID tests, which we are actively distributing. A large amount of funds, but definitely providing probably the biggest impact for our residents. We also bought for our police and fire a lot of PPE related equipment, keeping them safe, as well as retrofitting our ambulance with a hydraulic power stretcher. So that it can, keep our first responders provide them some distance when with the patient, and also it helps out for us, on liability issues with strain on our first responders when lifting patients that are in the stretcher. So something that we've been looking to invest in for a while. We were able to spend funds on that as well. So total ARPA expenditures to date, $320,000 and 26 cents. I'm sorry, $320,026.95. And our balance is $730,033.05. So that's what we've spent to date. It requires a approval vote from the Board of Selectmen. And I will continue to work with you on plans for future expenses.
Sounds good. Another sizable capital expenditure was the $43,000 for the portable radios for the fire department. I see.
Yes. Yeah. So we were sharing portable radios that didn't really work and meet today's standards. So again, like in the effort of maintaining their health while working in the field, having enough portable radios that they don't need to be shared. They're brought up to today's standard, fully even if we weren't utilizing the general government services tool, they would fall under the original guidance of capital under public health need, public first responder needs. So
I'm also this on the overall balance, the $730,033. There's a note here that says includes revenue not yet received. Is that so? We don't have all that 730 on hand yet.
correct. It comes in phases. Some of it came through, like it actually funneled from the federal government through the state to Department of Revenue, issued us funds. Some of it actually kind of came through county government, a little bit different. So the amounts, anyways, we pay for this stuff up front and then we submit for reimbursement. So it's okay that the funds aren't fully in yet.
Any other discussion?
Only, is there a sunset provision for these Arpa funds at all?
2024.
Does that mean they have to be spent by 2024?
Yes.
Gene, any discussion?
No, I think I'm good.
All right. If there's no further discussion, roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen, aye.
Josh Antrim, aye. Next item on the agenda, I think this is a discussion. Housing Choice Initiative, multifamily zoning requirement for MBTA communities. I think Tony, you and Dan were gonna discuss this from an information point of view.
Yes. I'm pulling up this Word document. Can you see this? It says section 18 at the top. Do you see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay. So this was included in an economic development bill in the acts of 2020, I believe. Chapter 358, the acts of 2020 was an economic development bill. Section 18 here is the language that was included in it, which is essentially a zoning requirement for all MBTA communities for multifamily housing as of right. So it's a requirement that MBTA communities include an as of right zoning for multifamily housing. It is not a production mandate. It's just a zoning mandate. And it's also not an affordable housing mandate. It's simply multifamily. 175 communities are considered MBTA communities. We are one of them. We are working with MAPC and DHCD to get a better understanding of the guidelines that the proposed guidelines that they are putting in place. Let me stop the share since I think this is I can bring it back up if you want me to bring it back up. I just wanted to show, the language that was in the law. So we get roped into this because our town boundary, which is the boundary at the Rotary, is within a half a mile of the MBTA station, the commuter rail station in Lynn. So by definition, we get pulled into this zoning requirement. But the impacts for us to comply with this requirement is significantly disproportional to us compared to the other 175 communities. First of all, we don't have any multifamily housing zoned in the town of Nahant. We don't have any MBTA station in the town of Nahant. And the closest part of Nahant that is triggered by being within half a mile is actually controlled by the state, and there's no residential housing over there. So we're trying to figure out how to fit in this puzzle. Really, the only penalty for not complying is that section B of the law. It says any MBTA community that fails to comply with this section shall not be eligible for funds from the Housing Choice Initiative, the Local Capital Projects Fund, or MassWorks Infrastructure Program. We currently don't receive any funds from those programs. But still, we don't want to be outside of compliance. We don't know how that could affect us with other grants or programs. So we're working with the DHCD, who's required to put together these regulations, and explaining to them our predicament, hopefully finding a way for them to include in the regs some sort of exemption for us. And those comments are due at the end of March. So I wanted to, bring it to our attention, let people know that we are fully aware of it and working on it. And by the next Board of Selectmen meeting, we'll have a draft comments prepared for you to review and vote on and submit. I've also reached out to Senator Crichton and Senator Crichton and Representative Capano's office, and let them know that we're keeping a close eye on this, and they will write letters of support for our comments, because they understand that our situation was kind of an unintended outcome of the law. Dan, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, just a little bit, Tony. That was great. Yeah, we given as Chairman mentioned earlier today, we are the smallest municipality in the Commonwealth, maybe even all of New England. So you might hear this term over and over again. We keep getting sort of the butt end of a lot of these regulations and a lot of these guidelines and the statute we talked about earlier. That's why we're here, because we're so small. And to that effect, the guidelines are just that. They're just guidelines. They're not regulations. So it's questionable as it's even questionable as to whether these are binding at all. But there's still something to go by as a barometer. And just to put it into perspective, if the guidelines are accepted, if they're used as some sort of measuring stone as to our compliance, then that would mean that we would have to designate 50 acres to multifamily housing. Now, to put that into real terms, that's the size of Kelly Greens and Johnson School properties. That's about 49, 50 acres. So we would have to somehow find a zoning district that size to be zoned multifamily housing. The second thing is the percentage of households that need to be multi-housing. And because we're what they call a bus service community in terms of these new guidelines, we would have to dedicate 20% of our housing stock to the multifamily housing. Now, given that our housing stock is only about 1,600, you would think that would be a pretty small number, but the minimum that they're going to allow is 750 units of the entire housing stock. Now that's quite a bit. That's 45% of our entire housing stock. So you can see how this is being inequitably applied to Nahant, and hopefully this will allow our comments to carry a bit more weight than other places around the Commonwealth. And I know Tony's working hard to make sure that those are vocalized and that they're heard and understood.
I mean, I can tell you that Secretary Keneally made it clear that, their guidelines and the law itself, the intention here is to promote housing near MBTA stations. So it falls in line with the environmental reduction, carbon emission reduction goals of the state, and things of that nature. So we obviously don't fall into that intended outcome. So the only thing I'm concerned about is the guidelines can't contradict the state law, and the state law says shall. It uses the word shall, so it is a mandate. So we'll see. We're going to work with them and try and figure out a way. It may require a legislative act to amend the law, but we're working on it.
It would seem to me that one of the issues here is that you're correct in saying that territorially, Nahant bisects the Rotary, but that land is owned and controlled by the state. So I wonder if that's a.
Is it owned,
Well,
or is it just controlled?
It's controlled by the state. I mean, I'd bring that to light to Senator Crichton and Representative Capano that this is not something the town has control over. It's technically it's true that the town's property line bisects the Rotary, but DCR has control over the Rotary and the Causeway.
So I brought that up in the meeting, and that we had with Secretary Keneally and other North Shore communities, and a number of people asked questions. I brought that issue up. Someone else asked about, state-controlled land surrounding these MBTA stations, because a lot of that land is owned. The land immediately adjacent to a commuter rail station, a lot of the times is owned by the state as well, right? So they were asking about that, and the response was, from the Secretary's office was that they're supportive of pushing state-owned land to be used for housing, and that this is not a production mandate, it's a zoning mandate. So I don't, they might come back to us and say, that's okay that they control it. You should zone it according to the law. They don't have to build housing there, but you should zone it.
So we can zone the Rotary for housing, right?
I don't, yeah, I guess so. I don't know. It's an interesting one. So we're looking into it, and we will, we'll get some answers and that back to you. With some feedback here. Someone came off mute who's on a phone. Were you looking to?
Hi. Yes. Hi, this is Debbie Vanderslice. I just was wondering, you say we're within a half a mile from the station in Lynn, but aren't we an MBTA community anyway because we get MBTA buses here?
Yes, the definition, what I was referring to, Debbie, is the definition in the law, that it's a half mile. You trigger this requirement if your town is within a half mile of an MBTA station, and the definition of a station is an actual structure. So even though we have bus stops, those aren't what trigger this requirement. It's the proximity to the closest bus, like an actual station.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. And my other comment was, even though the legislative language says shall, can't we ask for an exemption? Because that's what Cambridge did for the Dover Amendment, and it was through an act of the legislature that they became exempt. So why can't we try to ask our legislatures if we could try to get an exemption through a vote of the legislature?
Yeah, we certainly can. So we're first seeing if we can create some type of exemption through the regulations that DHCD is going to produce. If they come back and say that the law doesn't give them that authority, then the next step would be to ask the legislature to amend the law to provide them that authority.
Right. Oh, and I do just want to say for the record that I am all for housing. It's just that those numbers that you that I think the attorney alluded to earlier are obviously ridiculous for a town our size, and we could not accommodate that. So, whether it's an exemption or a modification, it seems that something could be done for our town. And that's my only comment.
Agree. So we're gathering more information at the next Board of Selectmen meeting, which is going to be on March 16th. We will provide the information that we collect regarding this law. And we are going to put together a letter of comment from the board to submit to the agency. However, you as a resident or any resident are willing to submit those comments as well. So, maybe wait until the 16th so that we can, all be on the same page, and then perhaps submit those comments on your own as well.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Any other questions?
No.
Brennan Baronic, 2 Summer Street. More of just a general comment. Although all joking aside, I don't think we should try to recommend zoning the Rotary for homes, because someone may try to take advantage of it and find some method to put condos there.
So that was a joke. I didn't mean that seriously.
I appreciate it. That's all I got. Thank you.
So, agenda here. Yeah, thanks for the update on that. And those requirements would be onerous for Nahant, to say the least. So looking forward to the updates. Next item on the agenda is preserving East Point. I don't have anything to add other than we're in this long discovery phase where both sides collect their information. But I think the next hearing is quite a ways off. I think maybe October. So other than that, I don't have anything to add. I don't know, Gene or Mark, if you had anything, or you, Tony.
No.
No, I don't, Mr. Chairman.
You mentioned at a previous meeting that you would like to have, like every other meeting, have our attorney come and give an update. Do you want to start that next meeting?
Yeah, I think so. I think, so I'll check in with Jeff Blake and also Jim Masterman and see what might be the next appropriate update, what sort of the next action coming, and figure out who we want to invite. Also, just a reminder for Selectmen Canty and Cullinan to get your goals in for the upcoming year for the town administrator. And I'll get those compiled.
Okay.
Next is the town administrator's report.
Thank you. I'm happy to report that mosquito control has begun mobilizing their equipment in the lowlands area for their winter stormwater improvements. We will be hopefully I believe they are going to start next week, basically right behind the Ward Road pump station and electrical substation. Removing debris from that ditch system so that it can flow more easily. And Zach's been in there the last couple of days clearing some vegetation so that they'll have access to that ditch system. So excited that that is happening. I also had a long meeting with FEMA today regarding our FEMA projects. There's 4, Willow Road revetment, 40 Steps Beach, Short Beach Dune, and Doggy Beach Dune. So we gave them an update on where we are with each of those projects. Our next step is to meet with the local permitting regulators to talk about time frame and permit requirements for each type of project, and keep the ball rolling in that regard. We are desperately in need of making progress on a lot of those projects. Short Beach obviously is moving right along. We have Conservation Commission approval. We're waiting for the order of conditions, and hopefully we'll be doing that project this spring into the summer. We have our engineers currently reaching out for time frame on materials. Doggy Beach, we have some back and forth to do with the regulators regarding the design of the project. They have some concerns about the current design and the existing revetment, and creating more of a soft solution there, which we'll go a few rounds with them on that one. Willow Road, originally the Willow Road revetment, we were approved $80,000 in FEMA funds for repair, and we have been going back and forth with FEMA on the actual cost for repair for the damage there, and they are like this close to obligating us $600,000. So a massive increase so that we can get repairs done to that wall, that revetment. A lot of it is repointing and stabilizing the toe of that seawall. Again, though, there's a massive permitting process that goes along with that. Go ahead. What's the question?
I'm gonna say that's the stretch between, let's call it Bailey's Hill or Ocean View, as far over as the first house on Willow Road, right? I just wanted to clarify that it's not Tudor Beach.
Correct. Thank you. Yeah, the revetment over by the golf course. And then lastly is 40 Steps. That's been a multi-year battle between us and the state regarding the design elements of that project, and we are continuing to battle that. The state would prefer to see more of a soft structure there, and we're doing everything we can to make our case as to why a complete soft structure isn't a viable option for 40 Steps.
Yeah, I would say keep up that fight because the soft structure would be gone. I mean, you mentioned that they are asking us to remove the concrete block at the bottom of 40 Steps Beach, at the bottom of the steps at 40 Steps Beach. I mean, that would accelerate the erosion astronomically at the first big storm, so.
So we have a ton of, so we're showing, luckily since Zach has been here, he's been taking like picture inventory of all of our properties after every storm and throughout like the seasons as they change. So we have some pretty good evidence to show that the beach renourishes itself with the cobble every summer. And that the cement barrier at the toe of that bank is not negatively impacting, the renourishment, the natural renourishment of the cobble on an annual basis. So there's that. And plus they make you go through like a huge alternative analysis, and you have to explain why it makes more sense to keep what's existing there. It's a similar situation with Doggy Beach, to be honest. There's a revetment on Doggy Beach, hard stone revetment, and then there's dune that's built up on top. We have to go through this process of explaining why we shouldn't remove the revetment and just rebuild it completely with a soft structure. It's honestly, it's frustrating, but we shall prevail. Just stay positive. Try to stay positive. We'll get through it, and I think it's just part of it was getting the right team on board. We have our new coastal engineer. He's so good. He understands the permitting requirements and how to navigate through that process. And I do think it may become a conversation about town meeting articles. And I spoke with the chairman. I haven't spoke with you or Mark or Gene quite yet, but we might want to think about an authorization borrowing article for coastal infrastructure and leave it broad and have the authorization available to us, should we need to take advantage of it for, upcoming grants that we might require a match, or for sometime, there's state funding will trigger a MIPA process, which extends the timeline and, obviously how much money you're spending on permitting. So if we are in a position where we need to move quickly and we want to avoid, triggering MIPA, sometimes using town funds instead allows for that. So it's something I'd like to talk with you guys individually about, what that number would be and how we would go about doing that. We're working, I have to commend Chief Furlong in our police department with his ability to navigate the change in police reform and how that's impacting our department. It's certainly having an impact on our budget, but trying to plan for the future with these changes coming into place has been extremely difficult. For those who are unaware, anybody acting as a police officer essentially will now be required to go through a full academy training. The town of Nahant depends heavily on reserve officers who are not full academy trained, but they are trained through a reserve academy. But the law no longer will allow that. So in order for them to be able to enforce, they have to go through a bridge academy, which the town is required to pay for. The risk, what we're concerned about, what many communities like us are concerned about, is that when these officers become fully trained, essentially they're in a position to go take a full-time job somewhere. And so the town would be left with a massive need for additional officers. So we're trying to navigate that. The other issue there is harbor master. So Oddly enough, in the police reform bill, harbor master and constables are both roped into that. So we've been trying to understand how that's going to affect us, and how we are going to be able to, continue to provide those services, and if they're going to be required to go through full training, or if we can kind of figure out a way to use officers for part of their services. So kind of tricky, but that's another big issue that we're working on at the moment.
Anything else, Tony, in your report?
No, 8:49. I'm good.
Okay, last item on the agenda is citizens forum. Is there anyone who would like to unmute themselves and make a comment or ask a question? Or is there anything in the chat there, Tony?
Brendan Baronic, 2 Summer Street.
Hey, Brendan.
Had a quick question about the fees that would be done from the police details. You'd mentioned the last year or two worth of amounts. Has there been any look back to see, the last 5-10 years? I understand this amount can fluctuate from year to year based upon the amount of construction work. So is there like a baseline that the town can assume that would be coming in from these fees?
So I did that look back so that we could provide some, picture of what we would have collected over the last couple of years. Certainly, we'll have to include this in our revenue projections as we build our budget in the future years. But we didn't go that far back. It's also, it's 10% of the cost of the detail. So detail rates have changed. And then, as you mentioned, the number of details has fluctuated. So we didn't go back that far, 5 or 10 years. It didn't really feel like it was going to influence the decision that much.
It looks, just eyeball-y, and it's 2.5 years worth, and so it looks like it's 40,000 a year-ish.
Well, I guess maybe the question is maybe the rate hasn't changed, but what about the number of hours? Like, looking back over the number of hours, if the number of hours are consistent or if there's wide fluctuations.
So help me understand your question.
Well, I was just wondering if you can just, if looking back over the last 5-10 years worth of the detail hours, if that 10%, if it, does that translate to, like, okay, there'd be 5,000 hours on average over the last 10 years. So, the town then knows, at the minimum, there might be this amount of revenue coming in, instead of it always being kind of a guess what's going to happen in the coming years.
Yeah, so when we would estimate based on the last like 2 or 3 years when we're putting together those revenue projections. We wouldn't go that far back.
All right, because I just wasn't sure if the last 2 years would be a good baseline given COVID and all that.
We wouldn't. We're not even going to include them in the FY23 revenue projections because it's just starting to go in now. So we would like to see a full year of what that added fee might do as how it might impact. And then we can have a 3-year sample to project those revenues would be good enough.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else want to unmute themselves? I don't hear anyone. Nothing in the chat, Tony?
I have a reminder from our librarian, Sharon Hawks. The library's Nahant Reads Together project is this month with programs every Saturday at 4 o'clock. They are free, and contact the library or check the library calendar and Facebook for details.
Thanks, Sharon.
Tony, I might have missed it at the beginning with Deb or John, but is the Johnson School changing the mask policy?
They're waiting till the end of this week.
Okay.
March 8th is when they're going to make their decision.
Okay.
So they have the ability, right now masks are still in place. They want to go through, a few more of these pool testings, which, as Deb had mentioned, went really well. That also applies to while our students are on the buses as well. So even though the state allowed for masks to no longer be required on the bus, Healy and NRT are following our local recommendation, still requiring it until they make an updated decision on March 8th.
I think the March 8th date was to give a week after the kids got back from vacation to maybe traveling or whatever and have some exposure. So give a week to see what that does to the COVID rates. I think that was part of the philosophy. Okay, if there are no other comments, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Seconded.
Roll call vote.
Gene Canty, aye.
Mark Cullen, aye.
Josh Andrew, aye. Night, everyone.